I'm going to tell you what happened to me last fall, but first I need to start with something my son told me 2 years ago. I also want to say that had none of this happened, I would have never ever started looking into this subject, but now I find myself thinking about it all the time. 2 years ago, my son was in 4th grade, and his class took a field trip up to a pumpkin patch in Sunderland, Massachusetts in October of that year. When he got home from school, my wife told me that he seemed excited about the field trip, but also a little shaken up by something, and she couldn't tell what was going on with him. I sat in his room with him that night, and he told me what happened. I expected it to be a scuffle with another kid, but that wasn't even close to right. He started with the normal things they did, like taking a ride on the hay truck and walking in the corn maze, but I had to pry the real problem out of him. When he finally told me, he said while the whole class was holding their pumpkins and waiting in line with the teachers and parents, everyone around him slowed down and then stopped moving. I didn't understand what he was talking about, so I asked him a second time. He told me again that everyone stopped moving. Kids, teachers, parents, and even people far away from him just froze. He told me he tried to talk to whoever was standing in line in front of him, but no one answered or even moved. Everything was stopped except for him, and that's exactly how he put it. Then someone cut through the people, walked up to him, and knelt down to talk to him. He either couldn't remember or wouldn't tell me what they talked about. Then this person just walked away and everything started moving again like nothing had happened. After our conversation, I got the impression he was worried about this happening again and that this person, someone he only described as weird looking, would be there. I remember listening to all of this and trying not to smile because the way he told it was so serious, and I guess I just wasn't ready for a story like that. I do listen to my kids, but this was total fantasy and something he'd probably seen in a show or a video game. My hunch was that he had gotten in trouble for some reason and was using this story as a cover in case his teacher contacted us. I explained that it's impossible for time to stop, even joking with him about how fast he was growing up and that I wished I could stop time. He laughed at that and seemed to be doing all right, so I didn't think about it again until I had my own experience a year later. That brings me to my story. Last October, I was behind our house replacing posts on 100 feet of split rail fence that separates our yard from a forested property behind us. Our backyard is a rectangle-shaped half-acre, and I was hauling bags of concrete down to the fence in a wheelbarrow. The sun had been going down, there was normal occasional wind making leaves fall, and I had one last post I wanted to set before going in for the night. When I was kneeling down emptying a bag of Quikrete into one of the holes, I swear to God, everything around me stopped. The sound of the wind, the leaves and branches, all of it, just dead still. While I was still on my hands and knees, I looked up and I was staring into the trees, just waiting to hear anything. One tree trunk caught my attention, but I didn't know why. Then when I shifted my eyes to another tree and back again, I realized something was moving, but I had only caught it with my peripheral vision. When my eyes focused again, I physically lurched backward and onto my butt because I had just locked eyes with a face. This wasn't low light playing tricks or a shape in the trees that looked like a face. There was something standing partially behind the tree, staring directly back at me, and it was completely foreign looking. What I saw was the general height and shape of a man, but the face was so far from a man's face, I don't even know how to describe it. Even with it partially behind the tree, I could still see it had a sleek, mostly featureless face, and the eyes were like giant black shadows on its face. It was a terrifying thing to see. I didn't even have time to get to my feet before it slid back behind the tree. I used the word slid because it looked like it was on wheels. The body barely moved, it just slid behind the trunk and was gone. I stood up and yelled that it was private property while walking backward toward the house, but I never took my eyes off the trees. As I was backing up, I heard a car drive by and that kind of snapped me out of my intense stare. That's also when I realized I was hearing wind and leaves and other normal sounds again. I jogged the rest of the way up back to the house, then stood at the kitchen window watching outside forever trying to figure out what was out there. While I was standing there, my son's story from the pumpkin patch just popped into my head. I think it was the way he described everything around him coming to a complete stop. I felt that same feeling out in the yard. It was like being in this limbo waiting for time to start again. The only difference was, in his case, someone walked up and talked to him. In mine, there was something watching me from the trees. What I experienced was so shockingly weird that I felt bad about brushing off what my son had told me. I thought for sure he was using that story to avoid telling us something bad he'd done at school. Now I don't think it was. I think he really did experience something, and whatever it was, I had a version of it too. That same night, I asked him if he remembered anything more about what happened at the pumpkin patch. Other than the main points, he had forgotten about most of it because of how much time had gone by. I really wanted to know what this person he talked to looked like, but all he could give me was that he didn't remember any details other than the person looking very weird. I really don't know what to think about it. Time stopping and alien figures in the trees behind my house were never something on my radar. What I saw wasn't human, and I don't believe what my son saw in Sunderland was his imagination. With fall coming around again, I keep catching myself staring blankly into the trees. I can almost feel the same stillness happening again, and I think about something staring back at me. It puts me in this mindset where I don't want it to happen again, but I feel like it's going to. Five years ago, I was staying at my parents' house in Petersburg, Virginia, watching my little sister while they were out of town for the weekend. She was in her mid-teens and I was in my early 20s. We both loved to cook and bake, so we spent most of the day on Saturday making cinnamon rolls from scratch and then cooked dinner after that. After eating, we were sitting in the screen room on the back of the house and talking. I had turned the inside lights off and we were watching lightning bugs fly around. Coming from somewhere in front of our house, there was an unbelievably huge burst of orange light that seemed to come through every single window. It lit up the entire downstairs as if I had every light on. I'm talking explosion bright. My immediate thought was that our house or our neighbor's house was on fire. This is what I remember happening next, which isn't much, but it's in order. We got up from our chairs in the screen room and ran inside the house. My sister went to the front windows in the living room and I went upstairs. When I got upstairs, I could still see bright orange coming through my parents' bedroom window, so I walked toward it thinking I would see the fire. Then somehow my sister and I both found ourselves in the living room together with no lights on and no memory of anything I just mentioned. That came later. All I remembered at the time was telling my sister I was going to call it a night, then locking up and going upstairs to bed. My sister said goodnight and we simply went to sleep. At that point in my mind, we had gotten up from the screen room and just decided to go to bed, nothing else. It took us both a few days to even remember anything had happened at all. It wasn't until the following week that my sister started texting me about having a memory of something happening while I was over there. She told me she remembered the two of us walking out the side door of our house at night for some reason, which is a door that never gets used, then walking out onto our driveway. I texted her back saying that that didn't happen and that it must have been a dream. She agreed with me and I didn't hear from her again until that weekend. When that weekend did come around, I saw her in person and she brought it up again, saying she was still having this memory of us going out the side door and onto our driveway at night, but that time she added something that triggered the first flicker of a memory for me. She said we were looking at some kind of bright orange light above the house that looked like a fire. It was when she said the word fire that it clicked for me. I immediately remembered seeing something like that and also being worried about our house and the neighbor's house being on fire, but I had to sit there with my eyes closed and really focusing hard to think of what that meant or when it even happened. This was weird because I couldn't tell if it was something from a day ago or a year ago. It's really difficult to explain. When my sister realized that I was starting to remember something too, she stayed there with me for a long time while we went over it again and again, both trying to bring back whatever this was. By the end of that weekend, and after about 1,000 more texts and phone calls, we finally did remember a little more and both agreed on what happened. Seeing the light blast through the house while we were in the screen room happened for sure. Walking back in the house and splitting up to see what was on fire also happened. What she remembered but I had forgotten and still don't have any memory of was that I came back downstairs, then we both walked to our side door for some bizarre reason, opened it, and walked out onto our driveway. After that, things are still fuzzy to her, but she says we were watching something burning above our house. This doesn't make sense because our house wasn't on fire, obviously, and there was never a fire at any of the neighbors' houses. It's a very uneasy feeling knowing something happened, but not being able to remember what it was. There's one last piece to all of this that took a while to surface. Maybe 2 months later, when enough time had gone by that my sister and I had basically accepted something happened to us we couldn't explain, we happened to be talking about it again during a family pizza and movie night at my parents' house. My mom interjected and asked if one of us had had a dream about the house on fire. Of course, we asked her why, and she told us that while she and my dad were at the hotel that weekend I was staying with my sister, she had had a horrible nightmare about the house being on fire and told us she could actually see my sister and I standing in the driveway together and watching it, but she couldn't do anything to help us. To say this was the most shocking thing I have ever heard would be a gross understatement. It left me totally speechless, and my sister too. My mom could easily see something was wrong, and we ended up telling her the entire story and every single piece we could remember. From that night on, it became our crazy, completely unexplainable family story, and we have no idea what any of it means, what actually happened that weekend, or how we are all connected to it. The only clue I've ever been able to come up with came about a year later while I was at a friend's house for a dinner party with a group of other people. After we had all eaten and hung out for a while, a close friend and I were drinking wine together and I told her the story. She not only believed every word of it, but she told me it was eerily similar to a book she had read. That book was Communion by Whitley Strieber. Too curious to even wait for the library, I had a digital copy of that book on my iPad a day later. As I started reading it, I came to one of the author's first experiences of being abducted. He recalled waking up to a huge orange glow coming through every window and being absolutely positive the house was on fire. The second I read that, I closed it and I still have never finished it. It was way too close to what I remember, and even though I want to read the rest, it's like I physically can't do it. I almost don't want to know any more about what happened, and that's where I'm still at now. I know there's an older movie out there based on the book too, but I don't think I could get through that either. That stuff really deeply scares me, so for now, it's just going to have to stay an unexplained family story. I have only had one single unexplainable thing happen in my life, but it's a weird one, and this is it. I'm a plumber in Boise, Idaho. A couple of years ago, a buddy of mine was building a new house up in Salmon, about 5 hours from here. I grew up with the guy and blocked off a few days to go up and help him get his septic system in order, along with a few other plumbing projects in the house itself. I live with my girlfriend, and normally she would have come with me, but she was working, so I drove up solo. That weekend, we worked all day Saturday and Sunday, then wrapped things up on Monday afternoon before I was going to drive home. I was beat from working all 3 days on his house right after having worked a full week at my actual job, and we had also done some drinking each night too. Before I left, he wanted to buy me a last dinner, so we hit up a brewery in Salmon and I had a huge burger with a pile of fries and 2 pints of IPA. I left town around 7 or so to drive back to Boise, and about an hour and a half into the drive, the light was fading and the food and beer started to catch up with me. I could feel my eyes getting heavy and I kept catching myself drifting on the road. I rolled the window down so air was hitting me in the face, and I had Chris Stapleton blasting to try and stay awake. Somewhere along the way, I actually drifted far enough over that I went halfway into the oncoming lane, and that jolted me enough to decide it wasn't safe to finish the drive without stopping to sleep for an hour or two. I pulled over on literally the next dirt road I came to and parked probably 100 feet off the highway. I don't know exactly where it was, but I wasn't too far from a town called Stanley. I locked the doors, leaned the seat back a little, and fell asleep with my head against the driver's side window. I was out cold immediately, then had a wild and detailed dream. In my dream, I woke up in the exact same position I'd fallen asleep in. It sounds weird to say I woke up in a dream, but that's what it was. My head was against the glass and I was sitting in my 4Runner just like I had been when I went to sleep. The reason I remember waking up was because I kept hearing this weird crackling sound right where my head was against the window. At the same time, there was a super bright flashlight shining in my truck and moving around. Without even thinking, I got this gut feeling it was a cop checking me out and wondering why I was parked back there in the dark. I sat up and turned the ignition on so I could roll the window down, then lowered it about a quarter of the way. I said out loud that I was sorry and that I only parked back there so I didn't fall asleep at the wheel. I got no answer and the light was still in my face and moving around so I couldn't see anything outside. The only sound I heard at all were these clicking, crackling noises. Hearing them with the window down made me realize that it wasn't crackling in the glass that I'd been hearing. It was this clicking that was coming from outside. It's hard to describe, but it reminded me of two animals, almost like possums or raccoons making fast clicking noises at each other, and it was right outside the door. Now thinking that this might not be a cop, I rolled the window up and made sure the doors were still locked. Then the flashlight moved away from my window and toward the back of my truck, like whoever it was trying to see if I had anything back there. I really started to think this was some random person and I could feel the adrenaline kicking in. I do carry a 9mm with me, but it was in a case in the back of my rig, so I decided to just start the engine and take off. I was just about to throw it in drive when the light that was now shining directly into my rear window started flashing like a strobe light. It got so bright the whole interior of my truck was lighting up. I'm not exaggerating, this was like a concert-level strobe light and it was blinding. Right at the moment I felt real panic coming on, like I was going to have to defend myself. I woke up for real. I just snapped awake like when you take a fast, deep breath from a nightmare. I was back in the driver's seat in the dark with my head against the closed window exactly how I'd fallen asleep. It took me a minute to collect myself and remember where I was at, then I checked the time. I had been out for about 90 minutes. I was also freezing cold. Not just cold, but getting waves of full-body shivers. I thought this was so weird because when I started the truck to get the heater going, the outside temp said 62 degrees. It was the middle of summer and I shouldn't have been that cold. Here's the craziest part. When I put it into gear to leave, my foot hit the brake pedal and I noticed I was only wearing socks. My boots were off. I can't really tell you how much this scared me. I definitely, for sure, 100% did not take my boots off when I pulled over. I just stopped the truck and went to sleep. There isn't a chance in hell that I took them off while I was sleeping either. They are my work boots and not easy to get off and on, especially being 6'3" with jeans on and sitting in the driver's seat of a 4Runner. That's not even a possibility. My first reaction was to get off that side road and back on the main highway, so I took off and drove to Stanley in my socks. When I got to town, I stopped at the first gas station, turned on the dome light and started looking around. My boots were sitting perfectly side by side on the floor in front of the passenger seat next to me. And get this, they were still tied. That was totally impossible, and I could not believe what I was looking at. I was too freaked out to even put them back on, so I just drove back to Boise in my socks. Let me tell you, it was the longest 2.5-hour drive I have ever had, and even with music blasting, it was the only thing I could think about all the way home. I kept imagining someone or something getting into my truck while I was asleep out there. It still gives me massive chills even writing this. So that's the one and only weird thing that's ever happened to me, but man did it stay with me. I'm not scared of too many things, but that was some supernatural alien stuff going on up there, and I don't want any part of it. I also don't think my dream was a dream. I think something really happened and I don't remember it. I think the only thing that I can safely say is that I will never again pull over to sleep on the side of the road like that.